AM 1160. That guy over there is Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. He joins us this morning, and you can give him a call at 479-1160 or 349 WCCS. Ask him your questions about your lawns, your gardens, and such. Conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, voted best personal injury law firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Good morning.
Good morning.
Weeds. They're everywhere. Weeds are hard to control, whether they're in the garden. I've got these weeds that my neighbor who plows my garden up for me every year says, I've never seen anything like this. The guy's 83 years old. He's never seen anything like this. They're in seed already. And so they're going to be a problem all year long, I can tell. But out in the yard, got those little purple flowers and the dandelions, of course, and everything like that. It's to the point where you pretty much just have to chill about those things and let them run their course, don't you?
Yeah, and some of them it's okay to do that with, really. and it also, the crop that you're trying to grow will influence whether you shrug your shoulders at them or attempt to do something also. Mm-hmm. The competition, is it going to be a problem for the crop? Uh-huh. And if it's, some of these things are winter annuals, so some of those things that are in seed, really, the majority of things that would be going to seed now are in that group of plants called winter annual weeds. Or we might just call them plants, and if they're okay where they are, then they're not really a weed, are they? They're just a plant that has germinated and flowered, and now it's going to seed, and then it will die because it's an annual. But it likes cooler temperatures and the conditions that we have now, and so that allows it to complete its life cycle. And then a lot of those only have one generation a year, so that seed is germinated when the soil's cold, and it might have been a month ago that plant started to grow. Mm-hmm. Usually those plants aren't real vigorous or big plants. A lot of them have a pretty low profile to the ground, and then they'll grow a little plant, flower, go to seed, and then die, and then the seed will be there, of course, and then that'll be what germinates either late next fall or during the winter, and complete that cycle all over again. And then, and those, for the most part, a lot of times just the normal tillage. If we use the vegetable garden as an example, those plants would be maturing now, but okay, that's okay because we haven't maybe planted any crops in our garden yet. We haven't worked that soil up, so just the act of tilling the soil will eliminate those. Mm-hmm. And they really won't be a problem for the growing season.
So where the ground got plowed up and the seeds that these weeds have generated have fallen on the ground, they could or they could not actually germinate?
But, yeah, most of them won't germinate. And then just that action of working that soil, oftentimes you will till in or work in too deep some of those seeds, and they won't be able to germinate because they're too deep in the soil. It's too dark, and conditions won't be right. Those plants, and if they do germinate, they may not be able to make it to the top of the soil, to grow that plant. They may die before they can grow enough to get a plant because they're too deep in the ground.
I guess I could be philosophical about it and say, well, if they do come up, they'll hide the beans from the bunnies.
Yes.
Or something like that.
But if they're hiding the beans probably won't do too well.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll compete with that crop and either shade it too much or outcompete it. Mm-hmm. And so you won't, you might have bean plants there, but they won't produce what you want them to produce.
I need beans
or
this
enough
year.
of it. Yeah.
The bunnies destroyed the beans last year, so I need beans this year.
You've got to be able to get some beans to freeze those.
I fenced that baby. I mean, I did the best fencing last year that I've done ever, and the bunnies still found a way.
Too bad you can't put a chair up there and just kind of sit and observe when they're out and see how they get in, huh?
They're there all the time. I mean,
you have a good population of them.
Yes, yes. Well, good is a relative term. But folks are thinking about getting their gardens out right now.
Yeah.
And they're working on their soils. And so that's going on. At the same time, they're looking at their if you're in my position, you're looking at your barn driveway and all those weeds that have come on there. And it's like, boy, I got to get that worked on. There's plenty to do outdoors.
Right. In spring, really a lot of things.
A lot of energy.
They've been resting. If they're perennial plants, they've been resting. And now that we're having longer days, warmer days, the soil starts to warm up. All those conditions influence when those seeds will germinate and those plants will start to grow and how fast they grow. Mm-hmm. So if we stay cooler and cloudier, then plants won't put on as much growth as if it was, sunny and warmer. And still need ample moisture, most things, but if we have those conditions, then plants will grow faster and develop faster. Some of those other weeds, when we get into perennial weeds, then those things can be more tricky. Mm-hmm. Because if they're a biennial, like a dandelion that starts from seed, grows a plant the first season, and then the second season will develop and flower and go back to seed, and then that plant will die. So it has a biennial 2-year life cycle. Mm-hmm. And then there's other plants that are perennial weeds, thistle. Some of the thistle, not all the thistles.
All the thistle?
Yeah, thistle. There's annual thistles, and then there's perennial ones. And the perennial ones will usually have multiple ways that they can propagate themselves. So they can have little root divisions they'll grow from a piece of a root. So you dig that plant out and you think you got it all, and just a couple little fragments of root on that Canada thistle it'll pop up a new plant. But then that plant also flowers, produces seed also that blow all over the place.
Yeah.
And so those tend to be much more challenging to deal with. Dock is another plant that has a root system almost like a turnip. Big fleshy root system, perennial weed. You really need to, that's where plowing, working that soil deep, turning that soil over can really be helpful with some of these more persistent perennial weeds, because then it exposes that root system, and hopefully then it dries out and the whole plant uses up the energy reserves that are kept in that root system, and hopefully they die. But that doesn't always happen. And sometimes, you even till the soil or spade your garden, but if a plant like a dock or a thistle get in there, sometimes that is not enough to eliminate that plant. Slows it down, but not eliminate it.
I got a plentiful crop of thistles in the yard that we're digging out right now. I want to ask you this. Earth Day is tomorrow. A lot of folks are talking about planting, and specifically planting pollinators. They want to attract the bees and the birds and get them pollinating again. In order to do that, if it's out around my garden and I want to plant things that I know are going to attract bees, what are the things that I should be thinking around, for the border of the garden?
Well, really, there's a lot of plants. So we're looking at groups of plants. Unfortunately, we can look up, people have made lists of a lot of those plants. A lot of those are native, shrubs and flowers that just attract a variety of insects.
I'm big on zinnias.
Bees and so some of those provide more beauty, the flowers, and may not be as good at pollination and attracting some of those native species as some of our other plant material. So just kind of looking at, okay, what are that list of plants, and that's a topic we can do on another day, but just kind of talking about some of those plants that we can use that are very attractive to bees and pollinators, and might aid in getting some other crops, like in the garden crops, vegetable crops, proximity there, allowing those to come to those plants, and then also while they're there, maybe visit some of the plants in the garden. But yes, just having those plants around, and the more we have some of those plants here, there, and everywhere, that just helps build up those populations and provides them a food source. Sometimes it's a place to live. A lot of course, bees and things are solitary bees that live in the ground, so they're ground nesters. But then they need those crops, those plants, that nectar, and that pollen as food sources. So we're just trying to make a connection in there. Have that plant available as a food source. They'll take care of making their own nest in the ground, but we have to have that variety of plant material to attract all those butterflies and bees and in our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And we've gotten away from that some, where we've just taken a lot of plants out. Or we used to have more hedgerows and fence rows, and even in our gardens, we've transferred. We've maybe gotten away from some native plants, and we've selected other plants because they had good attributes. It's not that they're bad plants, but in doing so, we may have taken away a source of pollen that a particular species of insect would have used.
Yeah. All right. So we're thinking about that as we get out and we plot our gardens.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So we will talk about that in our next visit.
Right. Sounds good.
He is Bob Pollock, the Extension Service, the Community Garden in Homer City. Big ribbon cutting for them tomorrow. I'm sure folks are excited about that. They'll be getting going here in Indiana soon, too, if they're not already, right?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a little activity going on already. Things are starting to happen.
You betcha. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
It's Indiana in the Morning on WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160 Fox News. Coming up next.